Hello there. We're picking up in the book of Esther, and Esther is also during the time, like we went through Nehemiah and Ezra. Esther is during the time of what we call the Babylonian exile, when Judah was exiled into Babylon. Esther actually takes place before Ezra and Nehemiah, probably about 25, 26 years before Ezra leads his group of exiles back to Jerusalem, and that would make it about, 40 years or so before Nehemiah takes a group of exiles back to Jerusalem and becomes governor of the area. So sometime between 486 and 465 BC is when Esther takes place. Probably about 483, I think, or in there, because at least the beginning of it, because it does say in those days, let's see. Anyway, it says about 3 years into the reign, I think, of King Ahasuerus. So we estimate that's about 486, so about 483 maybe the book starts. And it's during the reign of King Ahasuerus of the Medes and the Persians. He's also historically referred to as Xerxes the First. And this happens before the two trips of exiles back to Jerusalem. So interesting thing about Esther, the book, is God is never mentioned by name in the book of Esther. And if you read the book of Esther and you didn't know that, you would go back and say, no, that's not true. Because you can see the providence of God in the book all over the place. I mean, it's just a show of his providential hand. It's just he's not mentioned by name. There's implications all over, and the amazing events show how God is working in the lives of Esther, Mordecai, and the Jewish people, the Jewish nation as a whole. The book begins in the reign of the king Ahasuerus, who reigned, it says, from India to Ethiopia. So he was over a very large area of the known world. And a very powerful king. He's arguably the most influential man on the earth. So keep that in mind as we go through the little things about his anger fits and that kind of thing, because when you're talking about maybe the most powerful man in the world and having a little anger fit, you just don't want to be on the other side of that. It's the reign of Media Persia. There's things here. It's interesting. Some of the things it says, I'll make it a law according to the Medes and the Persians, according to Persia and Media, and it's kind of the thing you could say. The law of the Medes and the Persians is something that can never be revoked. So when they use that term in there, it's like this is something that's settled. It's just proclaimed, and so that's used a couple of times in the book of Esther. Just maybe take note as you're going through there. So King Ahasuerus throws a big party, starts chapter 1, and likewise at the same time, Queen Vashti is also throwing a big party for the ladies. And 7 days into the party, King Ahasuerus calls for the queen. So we'll pick up reading there in chapter 1 and verse 10. It says, on the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded a list of the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people and the princes, for she was beautiful. And then it says, but Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. Then the king became very angry, and his wrath burned within him. So this is the setting of the whole book. Is King Ahasuerus is throwing a big party. The queen's throwing a big party for the ladies. King says, I want her to come. I want to display her. I want to show her off. And she says no. And so that's where we have the beginning of this book, and it's the whole setting of this book. It's the circumstance that God has set up to bring Esther into a place of influence at this time in history. So verse 16, it says, and in the presence of the king and the princes, Memucan said, Queen Vashti has, the king's trying to decide, what am I going to do about this? And so Memucan said, Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but also the princes and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, causing them to look with contempt on their husbands by saying, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought into his presence, but she did not come. In this day, the ladies of Persia and Media who have heard of the queen's conduct will speak in the same way to all the king's princes, and there will be plenty of contempt and anger. If it pleases the king, let a royal edict be issued by him, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, so that it cannot be repealed, that Vashti should come no more into the presence of King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is more worthy than she. When the king's edict, which he shall make, is heard throughout all his kingdom, great as it is, then all women will give honor to their husbands, great and small. And this word pleased the king and princes. The king did as Memucan proposed. So he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province, according to the script, to every people, according to their language, that every man should be the master in his own house, and the one who speaks in the language of his own people. So anyway, there's a whole thing set up here. We're going to reject Queen Vashti. And we're going to send out a thing and let everybody know to preempt the publicity that Queen Vashti created by saying no to her husband. They're sending out a thing saying, it's not going to be that way. The men are going to lead in their households, and everybody should know that. And the king is trying to redeem his own reputation. So with Queen Vashti out of the picture, they're looking for a successor. So they go through a process, and in that process, we're in chapter 2, starting with verse 5. It says, Now there was a Jew in Susa, the capital, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair. I told you I don't guarantee any of the pronunciations of these things. The son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been taken into exile from Jerusalem with the captives, who had been exiled with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had exiled. And it says, and he was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, that's her other name, his uncle's daughter. So his uncle's daughter, we would just say his cousin, but his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. Now the young lady was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So we're in this place and we're looking at just a description. We're getting the background, kind of biography on Esther and who she is, and instrumental in this and very interlocked is the identity of Mordecai, her cousin, because she is his uncle's daughter. I think doesn't that make her the cousin? I think that makes her the cousin. Anyway, I hadn't thought that really through a lot, but my uncle's, that cousin. So verse 8, so it came about when the command, this is chapter 2, and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to Susa, the capital, into the custody of Hegai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Hegai, who was in charge of the women. Now the young lady pleased him and found favor with him, so he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and food, gave her 7 choice maids from the king's palaces, and transferred her and her maids to the best place in the harem. Wow. So anyway, Esther did not make known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had instructed her that she should not make them known. So here we have Esther comes in. She's very pleasing to the guy that's collecting all the women, the young ladies, into this harem that they're going to try out for queen. And when she goes in there, her cousin Mordecai tells her, "Do not reveal your identity." So anyway, they go through the process. There's things you could learn through all this. It's good to read this whole thing. It's really great. She was given any kind of cosmetics and whatever. She just asked that guy that was in charge, "You tell me what to do." And so he experienced with all these women before, and tells her she does it. She finds favor. She's chosen as queen. So we get to verse 17. It says, "And the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she found favor and kindness with him more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his princes and servants. He also made a holiday for the provinces, gave gifts according to the king's bounty. When the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not yet made known her kindred or her people, even as Mordecai commanded her. For Esther did what Mordecai told her, as she had done when under his care." So Esther's following Mordecai's thing and says to her right now that don't reveal your identity, even though now she's queen. Right now, we don't do that in marriage counseling, so don't tell anything about yourself. But anyway, there was reasons for this strategically, and it's part of the whole setup that's going to actually prove to save the whole nation of Israel.